blocking the road is committing a criminal offense.
Tyne de Nega, Mohawk Territory, April 25th, 2008.
Ma'am, stay back.
What happened in 2008 here in Tyne de Nega, at the Culbertson track, turned out to be an example for police of how not to manage an Indigenous protest.
Our work at Tyne de Nega has been very much focused on the policing. But there is, of course, the underlying issue of the failure to respect and uphold the land rights.
The Mohawks wanted to stop a housing development in an area under a land claim negotiation.
If anybody's going to develop the land, it's going to be the Mohawks, because it's Mohawk land.
The blockades ended, but the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, stayed, and tensions escalated.
This is it. Justice for First Nations communities. Lock us up.
The sudden arrests would be the start of a decade-long search for answers, accountability, and healing.
I've had nightmares, horrific nightmares about it. It is close to the surface, it always is.
On April 25th, Rhonda Kunkel was home in Tyne de Nega. The Mohawk woman hadn't been involved in the protests at all. And she didn't know her son, Matthew Kunkel, was several kilometers away, facing a line of OPP officers.
There were so many cops, and they were all right there, and there were so few of us.
Matt is the one wearing the hoodie.
I knew it was going to be a bad situation.
He had brass knuckles in his pocket. He would hit an officer while being arrested and later be convicted of possession and assault with a prohibited weapon. Rhonda had no idea what was happening until the phone rang.
And to this day, I have no idea who it was. And I asked her about my son, and she said, well, who is your son? And I said, Matthew Kunkel. And she goes, they are dragging his body out of the ditch. He's been shot, and he's dead. Whether it's good or it's bad, you gotta go. So we went down.
And I just put the four-way flashers on and drove as fast as I could. Might have been the difference between seeing our son alive or dead, really.
While Rhonda and her husband, Jim Kunkel, raced to find Matthew, the police standoff became volatile.
We've had what we believe is a long gun pointed at us.
An officer saw someone holding a stick and thought it was a gun.
Came over the knoll here.
They were all sitting there with their guns pointed at us.
All your cruisers.
It was very intimidating.
Police and everything.
It was very scary.
Get out of the vehicle, put your hands up and walk towards the white cruiser.
They had, at the time, it was a bright red F-150. No, I could see them come over the hill, yeah. Didn't know why they were there or how they got there so quick.
Okay, stop right there.
I didn't understand it because I was unaware of the phone call.
You see the cops and you see all the cruisers and all the guns pointed at us. I just remember being full of anger at this point.
No one's gonna harm you, man. Trust me.
I came down here because I was told you shot my son. You proved to me you didn't.
Who's your son? Matthew Kunkel.
So from that point on, I started freaking out in the back of the cruiser.
And you get him out of there and you show me.
I was literally kicking the doors, trying to get out.
And I said, well, I want to see my son. Well, he's right here in the cruiser.
You're told our son was shot.
Yeah. And as I'm walking by, I can see that he's upset and he's concerned for my welfare. And then I'm put in the cruiser.
Police would describe this in their notes as a high-risk takedown.
It would have been a high-risk situation for me, not for them. They're the ones with all the guns pointed at us. We could have been killed that day. Like, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years. The time has gone fast. I mean, life goes on. I don't dwell on it.
Hello! Where's Grandma's kiss? Hi! Again! Oh, nice.
Life does go on. Rhonda enjoys her grandkids. Matt's family is growing. But that day has left its mark.
As far as I'm concerned, with my feelings about the police, when they told me to trust them and then they did what they did, I'll never trust another one.
People need to know that this is still very much a live issue for the Mohawks that were involved and for our community.
Larry Hay is an investigator and a former chief of the Tyne de Nega Mohawk Police Service. He's worked with Amnesty International to examine the OPP actions.
They did everything wrong. They did everything contrary to what was recommended through the Ipperwash recommendations.
Linden says the OPP acted too quickly based on unverified inaccuracies.
Ojibwe land defender Dudley George was shot and killed by a police sniper during a land dispute. The Ipperwash report outlined how to avoid a repeat.
We've had what we believe is a long gun pointed at us.
Tyne de Nega would be an early test.
It was as if they completely ignored the playbook and did everything contrary. And that baffles me to this day.
I've driven about 3 hours north of Tyne de Nega to Orillia, Ontario. This is where the OPP headquarters are based. I was hoping to speak with the commissioner, but they have refused an on-camera interview, but I still wanted to come see and film at least the exteriors. The Ontario Provincial Police Service says it has addressed all the Ipperwash recommendations. There's an Indigenous unit, cultural training, and a framework to guide police in what they call Aboriginal critical incidents.
Bias-free policing, this idea of neutrality.
I just read you your right to remain silent. Do you understand that, right?
To enforce law in a way that wouldn't inflame or escalate the situations.
Tia Daphnos teaches at the University of New Brunswick.
These assertions of self-determination, whether,
She's written about the OPP's use of the framework, including in Tyne de Nega.
Someone described it as, being thrown into the fire, right? To translate, this thing on paper that sort of made sense to what that looked like in practice.
Daphno says the OPP has improved its use of the framework, but there's still an inherent conflict.
If it's about, Mohawk laws versus, Canadian laws, inevitably there's going to be bias, right, on the side of enforcing, these laws, these property laws or what have you.
What we're doing is policing the land that we're responsible to police.
The framework may only work if Indigenous people fall in line with police expectations.
It imposes maybe more constraints on land defenders because now they're being forced to participate within this framework, right? It's not just the police officers.
What have we got? You tell me what we've got.
And so it raises questions then about, what does that do then to justify or legitimate, more aggressive kinds of responses. If you do have sort of that use of force, right, it's almost automatically justified, right, because the assumption is that the framework works.
The Ipperwash report calls for an independent review of the framework. 12 years later, that has yet to happen.
Here we are 10 years later, and as far as I'm concerned, nothing's got any better.
Here, I found the file.
Rhonda and Jim Kunkel were never charged. They were released on April 25th after spending several hours in cells.
There's my hospital records I forgot about.
Rhonda has chronic back problems. She ended up in the hospital the night she was arrested.
Towing bill, ambulance bill.
She wanted to at least get her money back, but it took over 2 years to get her documents from the OPP.
It just felt like a lost cause at some point.
And the window to file a complaint had closed.
It was just to prove a point, like we were innocent. So why shouldn't they have to pay for something? But we were never compensated. There's your fingerprints.
the guy that was doing the fingerprints, he says, this is crazy. Like you got your hands behind your back, right? Zip tied.
Jim Kunkel was handcuffed when he was first arrested, but then kept in nylon or plastic restraints in the cell. Officers kept the other Mohawk men zip-tied for up to 13 hours.
They just did anything and everything to humiliate you, is what it was.
That is just contrary to the law. It's contrary to police orders, and we have actual video evidence of that. I heard complaints of police misconduct, the mistreatment of prisoners in custody. It became pretty clear that someone needed to look into this.
Was there an attempt on the part of some officers to punish them by deliberately hurting them, causing them to be uncomfortable, or humiliating them by keeping them in restraints? If so, that's potentially a criminal action. It's also potentially a violation of international human rights standards.
So this has been quite the process for you to gather all these documents. Coming up after the break.
You feel overwhelmed.
A 10-year fight for freedom of information.
There's an expectation and a strategy that, well, if we just drag this out, they will go away.
Hey, how are you?
And next steps.
Why is it important 10 years on to move this forward? It's because these issues have never been addressed.
Stan Jolly has collected stacks of documents over the last decade. Jolly is a retired bureaucrat for the Ontario government, a volunteer researcher for Amnesty International, and a paperwork warrior. This is what a 10-year battle for freedom of information looks like.
And I've said to myself and to my wife, nobody who's perfectly sane would stay in this process.
Officers' notes, OPP briefing books, police videos, all tied to Tyne de Nega.
A total of 86 different FOI access requests.
The OPP missed deadlines set by Freedom of Information laws. When information was denied or redacted, Jolly filed lengthy appeals.
Our experience is one of delay, bad faith, and obstruction.
We met with roadblock after roadblock.
Amnesty has filed a complaint with the Information Privacy Commissioner.
We would not expect to see this degree of resistance in a country that takes pride in the rule of law.
Craig Benjamin says the fight was worth it. The police videos are some of the only records of a conflict that largely happened out of public sight. And the concerns in 2008 are still alive today, in part because the OPP dragged out the release of information.
You're under arrest, under arrest.
For the OPP to say, well, this happened now 10 years ago, you can't expect us to re-examine it. Well, they're the ones that blocked the release of evidence.
This is just the paperwork to get the videos.
It took 7 years to get the full cell videos of the Mohawk men cuffed in plastic restraints.
It is so hard, and it takes so long to get even this evidence of wrongdoing that when you get it, you don't give it up.
Amnesty International took its concerns to the United Nations. The Committee Against Torture reconvened in late November. Canada's response?
The Ontario Provincial Police conducted an internal review into the handling of incidents at Tyne de Nega.
Essentially, the police are policing themselves, and there are no plans for a formal review.
This committee has already twice inquired about police actions at Tyne de Nega and about accountability for those actions.
Jolly says the use of zip ties may seem minor compared to human rights abuses around the world.
But they were humiliated. They were punished in a way by police whose job is to enforce the law.
In 2016, at the urging of Amnesty's lawyers, the OPP reviewed its use of zip ties, but concluded that it was reasonable.
It was a sham. You have a synopsis of an investigation that, first of all, did not even talk to any of the 5 men who were the subject of the complaint.
talking to the police. They're driving up and down this last road.
The OPP report described the Mohawks as hostile, arrested on the belief that they had committed violent criminal offenses. Mohawks threw rocks at a police cruiser. There were confrontations with non-Indigenous residents.
Ontario Provincial Police, where's your emergency?
The Indians have broken my windshield.
The Mohawk said the driver ran into one of them while police watched.
The OPPs are on my lawn.
They're already there?
No charges were laid. Dan Doreen had no prior criminal record.
So we're coming up to the hill on the quarry site. Disputed land, or not in my eyes. This is where, you know, on the 25th, the arrest started happening. Is just down the hill on the road.
He was convicted of mischief for the blockades in 2008 and assaulting an officer for when he took this swing at a detective.
If you ask me if I do it again, the answer is 100% yes. The land is not being used. The land claim is still a viable land claim. So I would call that a victory.
But one with a cost. Doreen says fixing motorcycles runs in his blood.
Almost more than Mohawk blood is in me. It's all I know how to do. This is all I know. And I love it.
He opened his own shop at the same time as the land reclamation. He couldn't do both.
You know, I chose to fight for the land, and after that, you know, it cost me my business.
So we've got to get some satisfaction, some level.
Hey there.
Stan, how are you doing, buddy?
Larry Hay and Stan Jolly have worked together on the Tyne de Nega project for the last decade.
We've had nothing but denial, and we've had nothing but an absolute dismissal of our concerns. And that's occurring in 2018.
Amnesty International calls the OPP response in Tyne de Nega a disproportionate use of force. 200 officers, the tactics and rescue unit, or sniper squad on standby.
It's indicative of the systemic racism that we have in society today, and within our institutions, including policing and the courts, that it doesn't matter. Indigenous lives don't mean as much as white lives. If this situation had been reversed and there were white people involved and this had happened to them, there would have been a national outcry.
This is a community-based research project.
Jolly has made the trip to Tyne de Nega to help host a community meeting to decide next steps.
Are we at the end of the road for this? Have we done as much as we could to get some justice? My cynicism is much closer to that of the men and women that I've been working with at Tyne de Nega, who, right from the very beginning, some of them said, "It's not going to go anywhere, Stan. You're not going to be able to change the OPP. They're never going to admit that they did anything wrong."
So we just give thanks for creation. Well, first of all, I want to open up by saying thank you to everyone for showing up. I know you're all very busy, but the question at hand is, where do we go from here?
In the spring of 2018, Amnesty International sent a letter to the former Liberal Premier of Ontario, Kathleen Wynne, outlining concerns, but no response.
It was disappointing that opportunity for authentic reconciliation was passed up.
People don't understand our anger, our hurt, why healing can't happen.
That whole scenario that day was against Natives as a whole.
It's striking that 10 years down the road, the determination is still expressed so strongly. The sense of the fundamental injustice is still articulated so strongly.
So the question is, do we bring this forward now to the new Premier to say we need an independent probe? I think we can anticipate what the answer may be.
I very much want to believe that in Canada, it is possible to hold police and government accountable.
The group votes to send a new letter to Ontario Premier Doug Ford listing concerns over police misconduct, bias, the misuse of zip ties. They want an apology to the Mohawks and an independent probe into police actions. Dan Doreen is the last to arrive at the meeting in Tyne de Nega.
Oh, same old.
The group has been talking about taking this to the Ontario Ombudsman, but there's debate.
And getting it out to the public and letting people know that when they go out and defend the land, what they can expect and the treatment they can expect from OPP or any other police organization is good enough. Going to the government at any level, you ain't gonna get shit.
They have to act objectively and third party.
You know, that's my opinion. If Stan wants to take it farther and the Amnesty International wants to take it farther, I appreciate their hard work, but I'm just kind of done with it.
It's going to happen again.
The residential
That's right.
schools,
Like,
how
look
long
at it.
did that take?
And nobody's being held
You can't
accountable.
stop. You got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Oh, I'm not saying I'm going to stop fighting for our rights.
Right.
Like, I mean, there is that part of it too, where it's not just about you, it's not just about the community, it's about all First Nations in Canada.
Because that's what the rest of the world really needs to hear to correct all that wrongdoing.
When I was arrested and we were thrown in a cell and we were zip-tied for 4 hours, 13 hours, fingerprinted and then re-zip-tied and put back in the cell, yeah, I think we need to tell that story.
I want somebody held accountable. I want the people to know. I want people to know that there is, that the police did wrong. The police was wrong in holding a gun to his head. As in, all we want to know was information on Danny. They had no right to do that night.
I think you get more reaction because the more people know, the better it is.
The land claim at the heart of this dispute, the Culbertson Tract, is still under negotiation. The Tyne de Nega Mohawk may soon see 300 acres of it returned, an area that includes this farmland and the quarry. But the 900-acre claim also includes part of the town of Deseronto. The story is far from over.
If anything major breaks, let us know. Okay, will do.
In the end, Dan Doreen and the others vote yes. They want Amnesty International to keep pushing for accountability.
Absolutely. Expect more here too.
Absolutely.
And the Tyne de Nega Mohawk say they'll keep pushing the boundaries in the hopes that Indigenous rights will remap the law of the land.
Time doesn't matter. I mean, look at the Culbertson Tract has been ongoing since 1837, and we're still pushing. And so this has only been 10 years. That's a small amount of time to seek justice from the Canadian government. And we're prepared to continue our fight.